So Anthony Joshua is sparring Joe Joyce ahead of his showdown with Kubrat Pulev later on in the year. And this also serves as preparation for Joe Joyce, who is provisionally slated to be taking on Daniel Dubois again later on this year. Now, Anthony Joshua and Joe Joyce know each other very, very well, at least in a boxing sense, because they have sparred countless rounds together in the past. And in this particular picture, you can see on screen from Anthony Joshua's Twitter, they've also got Marius Wack in there, who's been helping AJ out with sparring as well. Now, as I say, they're very familiar to each other in the ring. They've sparred countless rounds together. I personally think that this sparring, from a style point of view, will benefit Joe Joyce more than it benefits Anthony Joshua. That's not to say it won't benefit Joshua at all. And whenever you're in training camp, you're going to have a variety of different styles. You're not just going to have every sparring partner try to replicate the style of the opponent you're training for. No. That's not always going to be the case. You're going to have different styles in there to throw you a curveball here and there and to just show you different looks and keep you sharp. But when you look at Joe Joyce stylistically, he is absolutely nothing like Kubrat Pulev. He's taller than Pulev. His hands are much slower than Pulev. He is more ungainly and unorthodox than Pulev. He throws clubbing shots. He does have a pretty decent jab, but again, it's not on the level of Pulev's jab. His footwork isn't as neat and tidy as Pulev's. And as I say, his hand speed isn't as good, and defensively, he's not as good as Pulev. The only real similarity that I can see between Joe Joyce and Pulev is maybe the foot speed. Because although Joe Joyce has painfully slow hand speed and pretty slow reflexes as well, when he decides to move, Joyce has actually got quick feet. Don't even get that twisted at all. I mean, go and have a look at his pro debut against Ian Lewis. And I know it was only Ian Lewison, and people are going to say, anybody's going to look like they got fast feet against Ian Lewison. But there are other fights too where Joe Joyce decides to move, even in the amateurs, when he decides to move, he can get around the ring quickly for a big man, very quickly. So the foot speed is something that, you could maybe compare to Kubrat Pulev. He might even have slightly quicker feet than Pulev, okay? But other than that, there's not really much similarity there at all, stylistically, between Joe Joyce and Kubrat Pulev. Whereas Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois, again, they're different fighters, but there's more similarity there between them than there is between Joyce and Pulev. And therefore, if anything, Anthony Joshua is a taller, faster, sharper, and more skilled heavyweight than Daniel Dubois. Now, it remains to be seen whether he has, whether Dubois' chin is better. Maybe he's got heavier hands. Maybe he's got better powers of recovery, etc., etc. There might be certain elements of Daniel Dubois' game which are superior to AJ's that haven't really fully manifested themselves yet. But AJ is a sharper puncher. I'm not saying he's a heavier puncher. I'm saying he's sharper. He's sharper on the counter than Dubois. His attacks are more neat and tidy. He tends to land punches cleaner. Dubois is more of a clubbing puncher, whereas AJ lands these really sharp, fast, cleanly delivered shots. So for Joyce to be sparring rounds with AJ, I think that's going to benefit him massively. As long as he's not just getting terrible beatings in sparring, obviously. But if it's good sparring, it's going to sharpen Joyce up, get him to be on the ball defensively, because that's where Joyce is most vulnerable. We know that he gets hit too easily. And hopefully sparring AJ, it will sharpen him up. It will get him to be more defensively responsible. And when it comes to fighting Daniel Dubois, who's a slower fighter than AJ, maybe he'll be able to react better than we've seen him in some of his recent fights, more quickly, to evade shots and also take advantage of openings. So, yeah, I think it's great sparring for Joe Joyce. I'm not saying it's bad sparring for Anthony Joshua, but, you're not really going to get much in terms of preparing for Pulev or preparing for Pulev's specific style by sparring Joe Joyce. I wouldn't have thought anyway. I'm sure that Anthony Joshua has got other people in his training camp, maybe Eastern European amateurs or some other Eastern European pros, who have got a style much more similar to that of Kubrat Pulev, because Pulev does have that I want to say classical or maybe even stereotypical old school Eastern European style, the old Soviet style, where it's all about, fencing with the left hand, ramming in a stiff jab here and there, and just messing with the range. It's very basic from a tactical and from a stylistic point of view, but it's very effective. There were many Soviet boxers who won all types of different medals and were highly decorated amateurs for years and years and years using a style very similar to Kubrat Pulev. So it's an effective style. And so far as a professional for Pulev as well, it's been effective. He's only lost to Vladimir Klitschko. So, as I say, I think AJ's probably got other people whose style is more similar to Pulev in his training camp as well. And if he hasn't, he needs to get them in. Or else he might find that Kubrat Pulev is a lot trickier than he anticipated. So let's see. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below about the fact that Anthony Joshua is sparring Joe Joyce. Again, they're very familiar to each other. They've sparred countless rounds in the past. What do you think about them sparring again? Do you agree with me that it's going to benefit Joe Joyce more than AJ? Or maybe you disagree and think it's going to benefit AJ more than it will Joyce. Let me know, people.